All right. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Stephen with Gooseops, and after doing the OpenClaw live streams, I will be getting out an OpenClaw tutorial to do everything fully local and host all of the applications yourself. But before then, I wanted to start with something that I blogged about initially, which is if you're going to be self-hosting your own stuff, you should have yourself a file server. And I want to make sure that everybody at least has a basic understanding of what that looks like at your house and kind of how you might configure it quickly so that you can get started with having some way of backing up your own configurations and your own data, etc., so that you don't lose stuff in the event of an outage or a service. And you will have an outage at some point, especially if you're hosting stuff locally and you're not used to managing those services yourself. So today's tutorial is by no means the most secure way of doing it. It's by no means the only way of doing it, and it's specific to Linux systems. So it's not even something that if you're running on Windows or Mac, it's going to be immediately applicable. Although if you're running on a Mac, it'll be pretty close. If you're running on Windows, there are some different programs that you'll have to install, and you can see those in my blog about hosting your own NFS file share. Hosting file shares is nothing new. We've been doing this for a very, very long time. It is the way that the internet works. It is the way that on-premises solutions work, where you have files that need to be accessed or folders or directories that need to be accessed by company staff or by people who are VPNing into the headquarters network or what have you. The idea of sharing files to them without having to send them via email or via Dropbox or via some USB drive or whatever, it's been around for a while, right? That idea has been around for a while, and in fact, Dropbox and Google Drive and stuff like that kind of made the web SaaS version of local shares and local file shares available to the general public. So it's an older technology, but with people, again, self-hosting their stuff, they're going to want this. You're going to want some way of backing up these files, especially if you're adopting a local-only mentality for data privacy reasons. Then you don't want to be shipping this data to Google Drive or Microsoft OneDrive or whatever, because your whole point of doing things locally was to get rid of the dependency of those tech providers and owning your own data, owning your own keys. So let's go ahead and get into it. I'm going to use Terraform. You don't have to use Terraform. I'm going to use Terraform to provision two different machines today. We're going to provision a test file server and a test client, and these are going to be on my virtual server. Again, you probably just have two different computers that you're going to be running this on, and I'm going to also be configuring all of this over SSH as opposed to using a desktop interface. Again, you can do it this way, you can do it your way. This is, like I said, not the only way of doing it, but this is the one that's most readily available to me and into my own personal workflows. So we're going to uncomment out these Terraform configurations, and we're going to run Terraform apply, and we're going to say yes when it asks us, do we want to do this? It's going to say there's two to add. Those are the two machines that we're going to be adding. One is going to be our server, which is going to be where the data will actually live when we are creating this network share. So if we save stuff to this server, if we save stuff to the network share, it will live on this server, and I'll show you how that works. This is also not really a backup tutorial, so this is just kind of prepping us for the backup tutorial. And like I said, it's not a security tutorial. This is prepping us for the security tutorial. But what I wanted to get out there right away was something that you guys can use to have a space to back up your data immediately. Because again, I think there's a lot of people kind of jumping into the self-hosted space that are not backing anything up, and that's dangerous because you're going to wind up losing everything that you've kind of put together on your self-hosted machines if you lose that service or if that machine goes out or whatever. Okay, so that's done, so we don't need this window anymore. And so what I've got over here is the ability to connect on either of these windows. So this is from a previous session that I was just testing out. I was testing the demo out, so we're going to just clear that, and we're going to clear this guy over here as well. and I'm connecting from my dev box to each of these. So we're going to connect to the test client. Sorry, we're going to test the test files. Oh my goodness, file server over here, and then clear out all of this stuff, and then we're going to SSH to the test client over here and clear out all that stuff. And you've seen a couple of warnings come through. This is something, if you weren't fully local, you might want to be concerned about, but those warnings are telling me basically that I'm SSHing to a machine that is different than the last time I SSH'd to it. And which is true, because I deleted that machine and then I just rebuilt it. Since I know that that's exactly what happened, I'm not concerned about those warnings. But if you're in a different environment where you have no idea why you're getting those warnings, you should definitely check into them. Okay, so on the left side, so quick understanding of NFS file shares and server and client architecture. Nothing deep, but quick understanding is that your server is what serves the service. Okay, that's why it's called the server. And that server is going to be running a service that the other computers can connect to. The other computers on your network or phones, whatever devices on your network can connect to. When they connect to the server, they're going to be using a client of some kind. Okay, so that's where you get the server-client architecture, or client-server architecture, however you want to view it. But the client is going to reach out to a server that is running a service, and then they're going to begin communicating with one another using the protocol defined by the service, right? And so usually you'll have a server version of the software and a client version of the software. Not always, but usually you'll see that. And so today our software of choice is going to be NFS, which stands for Network File System, and it is a package that is very common on all Linux or I shouldn't say all, most Linux distributions, and it's been around for a long time. And we're gonna go ahead and install it and get it up and running on these two machines. So the server, and this by the way is outlined in the blog on setting up your own file share. And okay, so we're gonna install a couple of things. We're gonna run, as with all brand new systems, we're gonna run apt update, and we're gonna install Vim, because we always like having a text editor of some kind on our machines. So we're gonna do that on both of these. And to apt install Vim, and you can use the TAC-Y to automatically accept the question that it's going to give you, which is, do you actually want to install these things? All right, good. And we've got Vim on both of the machines. That should be the only requirement for the only prerequisite. And again, you don't even really need that. You could use a stream editor like sed to do these, but it's a little easier when you have a text editor. Vim is maybe a little bit more or a little bit less user-friendly than something like Nano. You can do a quick Google search to figure out which text editor you want, but I like Vim, and you're going to find lots of opinions on lots of different things, right? All right, so the next thing we need to do on the server side is we need to install our NFS server. So that package is going to be installed using apt, which is nice that it's already in the apt repositories, NFS kernel server, just like that. And we used -y to tell it to accept the question, hey, do you actually want to install these other packages? So just real quick, it's saying, hey, these other packages will be installed, and then and usually it would ask you a question, are you okay with installing these other packages? But because we passed the -y, knowing that we wanted the other packages as well, then it skipped that question for us. All right, cool. So now we have NFS kernel NFS. I guess that's not the name of the program. Anyway, so we're going to move on now to configuring the kernel server, and that is going to look like making a couple of directories and kind of adjusting the permissions on them. So we're going to start with making the directory serve NFS share, okay? And if we ls srv, we see that NFS is there, and if we ls srv NFS, we see that share is there. We're going to change the ownership of that to nobody and no group. And then, and what this does is it says nobody owns this and no group owns this. These are kind of pretend or pseudo users that don't really exist. And this is basically saying that an actual user of the system doesn't own the share. And then we're going to make it world writable and readable, which is not the most secure way of doing it, but it's the fastest way for us to get started on understanding kind of the system and how it works. So we're going to chmod, or change mode is what that stands for, 2777. This there's a whole, you could do a whole lesson on change mode and what that looks like, but basically we're saying we're giving it unlimited permissions. So we're going to do that on serve, NFS, and share. So now if I run an ls on serve NFS, it will notice it's green, right? Because that means it's basically wide open. Okay, and then we are going to add a line in our etc exports, which is going to configure the permissions and who can connect to this particular file share. So that is a file. So we're going to run sudo vim etc exports like that. And there's nothing in here. That's why we're adding something. And we're going to say, hey, the directory we want to share is NFS or srv NFS share. We're going to, the asterisk says any IP address. Again, this is not how you would properly. In fact, we can actually lock that down right now. We can just say 19, since we know we're only coming from the one IP address, which is the IP address over here. We can see it over here is this one. We can just paste that in here without the /16. And that way we know we can only reach it from this client. But the problem with that eventually is that you may have more than one device that wants to connect to this share. And so what you'd want to do is add those individual lines with individual IPs for those individual devices, which can get kind of tedious to add those every time, which is why a lot of people will use asterisk here and then just control it with permissions to make sure that you can't accidentally get access to things that you're not supposed to. Again, we're not going to dive super deep into what these different permissions mean, but we will at some point to determine or to demonstrate how to properly secure an NFS share. Again, this is just getting us up and running and started. So what we just said in that real quick is we're saying, hey, this share is accessible by this IP address. And so the server is only going to respond to requests from this IP address on this for this share. And then these are the permissions that we're giving it. Most importantly, or what you guys might immediately recognize is this read-write permission. These other things, like I said, we're not going to go into right now, but we will go into at some point. All right, and then we're going to export those shares by running this command, export fs. All right. Okay, good. And then we're going to restart the service so that we use systemctl to do that. Systemctl restart NFS kernel server, and we're going to enable it. So restarting it does exactly what you think it would. It restarts the service. Enabling it creates a symlink to the, actually we can read it right here. Synchronizing state with sysv service script. What that does is basically it says, hey, when this machine starts up, we're going to also start up the kernel server. Okay, and that's it for the file server for now. We're going to clear this out, and we're going to go to that directory that we just are now sharing. Here, the share, and we're going to run an ls. There is nothing here, if you'll notice. Right? Nothing exists. Okay, and so there's nothing in that. Now we can come over to the client. Okay, so what we want to do from the client is we want to say, hey, I want to use that share that's being served up, right? And so actually one thing we're going to need from the file server is its IP address, all right? And then over here, we can begin to configure the client. Okay, So first, we already installed Vim, which was one of the prerequisites because we're going to need to do some text editing. And now we're going to run sudo apt install. Now this is going to be slightly different than before. Before we installed the NFS -kernel-server. This time, because we don't need the server, because we're not running the service, we only need the client, we're going to run NFS-common. Right? And again, you're using -y to accept the question, do we want to install other packages? All right, that was pretty simple. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create a directory to mount that share in. Mounting is a common term when it comes to drives and storage locations in the Linux world. And what it means is we're saying, hey, we're going to create a directory. It's not going to be it's like a virtual directory almost. Wherein what we're saying is in that directory, we're going to mount this file share that's being served by the server. So this is a directory that doesn't actually exist on our machine. Well, it does actually exist on our machine, but what we're putting in that directory is the shared files from the server that is sharing those files to us. So we're going to make the directory where we're going to mount the share like this. The -p says if the whole path doesn't exist, make the whole path for us. And then we're going to run a mount command. And this is where we need the server IP, which is 112.168.1.150. And then we're going to give it the path to the directory that is being shared to us. So serve NFS share, right? And I know it wraps around, but it's really simple. And then after that, we're going to do a space. And then where are we mounting it? We're telling it where we mount it. We're mounting it right where we just created that directory. So /share. Okay, and hit enter. And that should be done. And so now if we go there, there's nothing there. Cool, fine. But you notice we do have the same permissions that the other one has, even though we didn't give it those owners, same owner and group, right? We didn't give it that. So we can see that, which means that we are actually already mounted. One thing to do before I demonstrate that we're connected, well, we did just demonstrate that we're connected, but before we start adding files to show that, is we need to add something. In order for this mount to happen, we have to run this mount command. Well, it would be frustrating to run that mount command every single time that we start the machine up, or restart the computer or whatever. And so what we're going to want to do is make sure that that happens. Now, you don't have to do this. This is an optional step. But if you want it to be mounted when you start your computer, that's dependent on your workflow. I usually like mine to be mounted when I start my computer. If you want it to be mounted, then you're going to have to add something to what's called the FS tab or the file system tab. And what happens is that FS tab is then loaded on startup with the file systems that are configured in there. And so we're going to go ahead and do that now. We're going to configure FS tab. And so we need vim for that and sudo. So we're going to run sudo vim etc FS tab. Actually, a good thing to do before you run this is to copy that to a backup so that you don't break anything. Now, if there's nothing in FS tab right now other than comments, and so we don't really need the backup, but I'll demonstrate how to do that real quick. We're going to run sudo cp etc fs tab to etc fs tab.back. Right, real simple, and we're copying it, so the file will stay intact, and then we will get a backup. And if we run ls etc, we should see the backup in here. So here's FS tab, and here's the backup. Okay. Now we can go ahead and edit that file. FS tab. All right, cool. Oh, I'm sorry. There are more than just comments in here. Whoops, I was wrong. So I'm glad we backed it up, because if we had just blown it away, that wouldn't have been great. We wouldn't have blown it away, but if we had edited it and corrupted it in some way, that would have been a problem. All right, so in here, we're going to start with the IP address of the machine that we are reaching out to, which is 192.168.1.150. This is the server IP address. And we're also going to include the path on the server to the directory that is being shared with us. And then we're going to include the path on our local machine. This is very common syntax when you're dealing with files and copying or making directories or moving things. You do the source first, or doing symlinks, whatever. You're going to do the source and then the destination. So the source in this case is the IP address of the server and then the path. And then the destination is our local machine. And so we don't need an IP address because it's local. And we give it the full path to the file that or the directory that we want the mount point to be. The file system that we're using, and then the permissions that we are configuring for the client. Again, not going to go deep into the permissions here. And again, this is not the best and most secure way of doing this. And we should make sure in the future that I will make sure in the future that I give a more secure way of doing this. Again, this is just a quick setup so that you guys have some way of saving and backing up your stuff, your local configurations for different things that you're hosting. All right, so that's it. And now if we show that file, I think we can show it through here. Yep, that file is here. So if we were to reboot this, this is going to get loaded in and function. All right, now let's demonstrate that we are fully connected. So this didn't exist here. And we'll go ahead and clear this out. There's nothing in either of these directories, right? And so what we're going to demonstrate here is that they are in fact connected. Also a quick demonstration that they're different machines, which we've already shown if you're following along. But this one is at IP address 150 and this is IP address 151. So we're on different machines here. And so yeah, so what we're going to do is we're going to create a file. It doesn't matter what the file is. File from server.txt, and over here we should see that file now, and we do. So that shows us that we are in fact linked up. The server is serving this directory up to this machine, to the client, and the client is able to see what's there. And I think I can I edit this? Yeah, cool. And so now if, since I just added that, if I cat that, I can see that there is in fact some text in there. And same thing, I can go ahead and touch another file, I can create another file here. And if I run ls here, you see both of them. And then over here, I can run file from client, add test, save it. And then over here, if I cat the file from client, I see that there's test there. So they are in fact connected up, and that would be how you would configure your server in the way you configure a network share so that you have access to some reasonable way of backing up your configurations that you're working on now that you're self-hosting services and things that you're running yourself, services that you're running yourself. So a file server, I think, is the first thing that you should start with. Many of you may have started with other things like a Jellyfin web server or a media server of some kind, or OpenClaw, like we went through with the live streams. But this is where you should start, because you want a way of backing up your stuff. Maybe I'll do another video on proper backups and proper backup recommendations and design as well. So we need to do, so quick recap, file server and client. We're using NFS, the network file system, as our software. The server is using NFS server to serve up a directory that can be shared to other clients on the network, or that can reach it. The client uses NFS common to reach the NFS server and therefore mount the server directory that is being served. And once it is connected up using the steps that we demonstrated, it is able to create files in that directory and edit files in that directory, and then know that those are being pushed over to the file server and being saved. Now, the point that I want to make real quick before we go is saving it here. I'm on the client, right? Just saving it here isn't really a backup. It would save you if the client goes down or the client machine goes down, but what it doesn't do is save you if the file server goes down. So an actual true backup would not be if you are creating files and just saving them in the share, and that's the only place you're saving them. That's not a true backup. What you would want to do is, once you have, so let's say maybe in my home directory, I've got make their important stuff. And there's nothing, it's a touch important stuff 1, important stuff 2. Okay, cool. So I've got two things of important stuff, and I want to make these directories. I want to back those up. So I have them here. What I should not do is just start making those files in the share. But what I can do is I can copy those. I can copy that directory to this directory. And now if I look in there, I should have my important stuff directory, and I should have it over here as well. And so now it's in two places, right? Now it's on your client and it's on your server, right? And so that would be, you would run a cron job or a script or something like that to back up the directories that you wanted backed up regularly into your mounted file. But anyway, that was all kind of beside the point, a little bit of extra fluff on the end. We will go through proper backing up, proper security of our network shares, etc. in the future. So I hope you liked this content. And if you did, please hit the bell notification and subscribe so that we can continue putting out good content for you guys and getting all of those of you who want to self-host stuff up and running with fantastic home clouds and home labs that you can use on a day-to-day basis.